I will admit that I was extremely shocked back in 2019 to see the cost of some of the things that I wanted for our wedding.
Yeah.
Right? Like, you just don't know that sticker shock until it's in front of you.
Yeah.
So I think, aligning on what the priorities are. Like, do you just want to throw a really, really cool party? Great. Like, maybe you have a higher budget for food and drink.
Sure.
If you are super adamant that you have like the best photos ever, maybe your photographer is a bigger part of that budget and you can save money in different areas.
Hey everyone, welcome to another episode of Wallet Wisdom, a podcast presented by LMCU. If you're new to the show or been listening for a while now, Wallet Wisdom is designed to help break down some of banking's more complex and confusing questions. I'm your host, Brett, and I can't wait to dive into today's episode. Well, again, we are super excited to have Olivia Urbanski here on Wallet Wisdom. And again, thank you so much for joining us today.
Thank you for having me. I'm really excited to be here.
Absolutely. Well, we've got a fun topic today, of course, to dive into and thinking about those wedding bells and planning for those moments of how do we think about our finances when we get married. But you know what? Before we jump into that, I'd love to hear a little bit from you about what you do for the credit union, how long you've been here, and just to kind of help our audience get to know you better.
Yeah, so my role here is regional director. I oversee our Grand Rapids Central region, so 8 locations where I work directly with the market leaders to drive growth for LMCU.
Wow.
I've been with LMCU for almost 12 years. I started as a teller back in 2014.
No kidding.
And just worked my way up. So I've been in this position for just a few months now, but I'm really excited about where we're heading and how I can make this role kind of like my own thing.
Well, and it's no small role. I mean, we continue to grow in branches. We continue to grow in like our geographic footprint. And just that leadership component is super crucial. Thinking about that, then that means you've had a lot of opportunities to interact with many of our members throughout the years and just navigating those important monumental like milestone moments in life. One being getting married, what an exciting time, so much going on, a lot of planning. I mean, I've been married for 18 years now. Is that right, honey? And I know you're married as well. So like that time can be stressful, getting all your things and ducks in a line just to, for the ceremony and the marriage components. But a lot of times that can get missed during those times is talking about how we want to do our finances when we are finally married. And so I'd love to hear some of your perspectives of what you've interacted with members and maybe some of the approaches that they could be thinking about.
Yeah. So I think one of the most important things is not waiting until after that marriage certificate is signed to have these conversations, right? Like,
good point.
You want to make sure that you and your significant other are aligned on what your savings goals are, any debts that you may have or assets. And so just making sure that like those conversations are open and honest.
Yeah.
There's so many ways that couples think about the way that they're going to intertwine their finances, right? There's no right way whatsoever.
Right.
It just is going to depend on what works for you. So I think we see everything across the board, right? We see people who are going to go all in, everything is combined, they have one account and they're kind of working out of the same thing. We see a mix of that where maybe all of their shared responsibilities are in one, and then each couple still has their own kind of like fun money spending account, right? And then you see people who completely keep it separate. When people are keeping it separate, the important conversation to have is, what is that going to look like for our shared responsibilities?
For sure.
So are you contributing 50-50 to what those responsibilities are, or because maybe somebody in that relationship makes a little bit more than the other person?
Sure.
Is that more of a 60-40 split?
Right.
So over the years, my husband and I have had plenty of conversations about what that looks like for us, and we found a way to do it that we feel good about. So I think it just depends on, what that looks like for you as a couple.
So, and with that too, so the way that my wife and I kind of do our setup is we have a shared account, and then we still have kind of our separate accounts as well.
Yeah.
So it's easy to transfer funds, and we kind of can have kind of that shared, account, if you will. But I'll tell you, I think about myself, and I'm a spender. and she's a saver, right? And when you're kind of coming into it, and I think that's a great little bit of advice that you shared of, talk about these things before you're getting married, because unfortunately, these are the same topics that can lead to not good situations as well in marriages, right? It's that weird thing, money, But, when I think about how you think through spenders versus savers, that's going to be that conversation piece of how do you come together, and that's what a marriage is. It's a partnership, and we're trying to make each other better versions of ourselves. Yeah. And so, like for my wife, it's been helpful for me to be less of a spender because she can help hold back a little bit and say, do we really need that right now? And I need that in my life. So, when I guess, like you mentioned, there is really no one way to go about it. It really is about what works best for our members and for really you as a couple. When I guess the philosophy around those things versus saving versus spending, would you say you're more of a spender? Are you more of a saver, or kind of in between?
I think I fall somewhere in between. There's some things where I have no problem spending money. And then there's other things where I might research for a really long time to find the best deal.
Yeah.
My husband tends to be like if we need it, just get it. Don't waste your time,
Sure.
Looking for all of the possible resources to save $10, right? So we've kind of over time helped each other in that way,
Sure.
where there's some things like really large purchases where I'm like, no, it's important for us to research this.
Yes.
Like I could save us potentially thousands of dollars if we buy a used car versus a new car.
For sure.
For an example. But then on the other hand, some small things, he's like, we're not going to spend hours researching when it's going to save $10, right?
Right.
And so I think my perspective on saving versus spending might be a little bit unique in comparison to what others might say.
Yeah.
I like to spend in alignment with things that will elevate my life, make my life easier, or contribute to my goals.
I love that.
So if you're feeling guilty over a purchase that you made, that's probably a good time to reevaluate whether you should be spending or saving.
The gut check, if you will.
Yeah, right? So what I like to do is if I was going to purchase something and I would have been fine spending money on that thing, but I decided that's not in alignment with my goals or
Sure.
not in alignment with something that's going to elevate my life, then I throw that in my savings account. I was okay with that money leaving. I just didn't want it to leave on that specific thing.
Yeah.
So I get to watch my savings grow instead.
I love that. I never really thought of that, is if you decide you're not going to, then you were already set and good to get rid of that, and spend it, put it into a savings and let it kind of mature a little. And maybe there's something else down the road that comes out that's better and you can buy that.
For sure.
Now, what about, do you have any like a dollar amount that you've agreed upon with your husband, as far as like, if it's anything over this, let's evaluate together? Or, and even so, like, by now, like same with my wife, it's just unspoken now. We know these things, but early on when you're newlyweds, a lot of that communication is key. Was there anything in your early years that you kind of had to establish that? Like, if it's over 500, we got to talk.
Yeah. We're like you and your wife now, right? Like we kind of know what needs a conversation and what doesn't.
Right.
But I would say like early on, it's just going to be whatever works for that couple.
Yeah.
People are going to be in completely different financial situations. So
fair.
$100 to me might be feeling like $10 to somebody else, right? Or vice versa.
That's a good point.
So I think it's just going to be important to, again, have the conversation. If you're not having the conversation ahead of time, then you're going to be surprised after the fact.
Yeah.
If you and I were a couple and to me that dollar amount was 500, but to you it was 100,
Right.
and I go spending 5, you're going to be like, hey, what the heck?
Right.
Why did you do that? We should have probably talked about that purchase ahead of time.
That expectation gap, if you will, of like, I think so, but I don't, like, talk it out. Like, that's great advice.
I've heard from members so many times over the years, I need to go back and talk to my spouse about this, right? And I think that's so important. I've never once questioned somebody who told me that, whether I was saying this would be a really good product or service for you. If they say, I have to talk to my spouse, I say, absolutely. Here's my card. come on back when
That's
you guys
right.
have that conversation.
I love that.
Should be for everything when you're in a relationship with somebody.
Absolutely. I think also that really lines up to a lot of the episodes we've had in the past about budgeting, right? It's so important to know your budget. And you know, a lot of times we talk about your personal budgeting, but in this case, it's about also knowing your couple spending and your budget for what we want to do for the future. You know, you might be getting married at first and you might be looking at an apartment to start, but you got to be thinking about also, should I be buying a house, and what do we need to budget for that to start saving? And that can also kind of ebb and flow at different seasons in life.
Yeah.
You know, a big topic is also about starting a family. You know, kids are not cheap, and diapers
Definitely
aren't cheap
not.
anymore, and like everything has gotten more expensive. So being really intentional about spending and where we're going to spend and where we're going to budget, I think that also is really critical. You know, thoughts on that? You know, I've got 2 kids myself, and so that's a big topic. I mean, it was amazing, those milestones. Like when they went to full-time school, there was a raise in my paycheck, right? Because there's no daycare cost anymore. Could you share a little bit about that?
Yeah. So again, it's going to come back to that conversation, like aligning on what that looks like. I think when you're setting a budget, it's really important to revisit it.
Yeah.
My husband and I have talked. We haven't implemented this yet, but we've talked several times about like having like a monthly budget day, right? Like where we sit and we look at what everything looks like. I think that could be a really good thing for people to implement into their routine.
For sure. And it's scheduled, right? It's like on the calendar. I know like
Sunday morning.
Get busy, you know? Exactly. Yeah.
Right.
Let's go have breakfast and we're doing our budget meeting.
Right.
I love that.
Yeah.
That's really smart.
So, I mean, saving for any type of goal, whether it's going to be like buying a house, upgrading your car, kids in the future, having that conversation and aligning on how much of your income needs to go towards that goal is going to be really important. Things are going to pop up.
For sure.
I might not be thinking about a car, but if my car breaks down on the way home today, that's going to be a new thing that we have to talk about, right?
For sure.
So as long as we're revisiting it constantly and everyone is in alignment on what that looks like, there's going to be give and take, right?
For sure.
You have to like sometimes think, okay, I might want to save for this thing, but my spouse doesn't necessarily think that's important to save for.
Yeah.
What does that look like? How much is feasible for me to put towards that goal when they think there's other things we should be saving for instead? So kids, they're a really large expense. I have two young boys and we spend a lot of money on childcare. When my husband and I first started dating, I tell him all the time I was grooming him for me to be a stay-at-home mom.
Okay. I love that.
Yeah.
Didn't turn out that way, but
it did not. No. But that's because after we had our first son, I wanted to go back to work, right? I love my kids so much, and I was craving adult interaction more than anything after those 3 months.
Yeah.
And so, you know, for us though, what we talked about several times in that first year of our first son's life is full-time work the right decision for me? Do I want to go part-time? I definitely want to do something outside of the house, but what is our lifestyle going to look like if we make that change? Does it align?
No doubt.
And ultimately, when we looked at it, my take-home pay was basically daycare. But there was a lot going towards things like retirement and savings that were kind of like those unspoken things that you're not necessarily thinking about. You look at your paycheck and you're like, this is the money I make. And then it flies out the door on Friday when you pay your provider. But there was a lot behind all of that take home pay that was going towards our end of life goals.
Sure, absolutely. And I love that because that reminds me a lot of like my wife and I's, you know, early years with our kids as well. And just kind of determining like, does it make sense to have you working if it's just paying for the daycare for you to work, right? And so, you know, evaluating those things like, you know, retirement, 401ks, like if that's going to help in the long run. But also the other thing that's often missed is your mental health. Like you said, like you can only be the best mom or the best dad or the best parent as an abundance of overflow of what you're doing to fill your own cup. And if you're feeling like you're less than full, it's hard to give out of a half full cup.
Yeah.
And so if being able to work part-time gives you a little bit of joy, gives you a little bit of that, even if it's kind of just paying for daycare, in the long run, like you said, it could also be a really valuable thing to have.
Yeah.
So again, it all comes down to what's best for your lifestyle, and what you come to an agreement with your spouse, It's a partnership, and there's compromise, and there's that whole component of that. So, Olivia, when I'm thinking about when Amber and I, my wife, got married, one of the things too is we mentioned earlier, you get those cards with a little bit of money, a check maybe written out, and from friends and family, and honestly, it goes a long way. It's very helpful. But again, bringing those accounts together, we ran into a situation where at the time when we got married, we had different banks that we were at the time, and so we knew we wanted to do something, but we weren't sure the right way to go about it. When couples are kind of navigating that, what might be a good method to consider? Should they stay, in their separate, or should they bring all their funds under one roof? Is there benefits to that? And, pros and cons, I guess.
Sure. I feel like depending on how you're going to set up your finances, whether you're going all in jointly together, if you're keeping like one joint account and then your separate accounts, it's going to depend on what that person wants. So if you've been with XYZ Bank since you were 12 years old,
right,
and you love them, and Pam, your teller, is great,
right,
you might want to stay there, and that's totally okay. But your spouse might be at a different institution where they have the exact same feelings.
She has their own Pam that they want to stay with, right?
So have a conversation about like the pros and cons of each of your current situation, and then take time to actually look for an institution that cares about you as people.
For sure.
Like LMCU.
I've heard of that.
You'll love banking here.
I love that. It's true. And that's really a big thing. We hear that a lot from our members, is just that approach to like sit down, help me navigate this, look at different options, and really give the information to our members to make the best choice for them, you know? So, I think as we're kind of getting close to wrapping up, it's wedding season right now. So there's a lot of people who are going through this very thing for the first time. And it can, unfortunately, again, the costs of a wedding, the costs of, a celebration and everything else, getting budgeted, I would imagine, must be pretty important.
Yeah.
What could you help some of our listeners understand as maybe they're navigating, saving for their wedding and all of that?
I will admit that I was extremely shocked back in 2019 to see the cost of some of the things that I wanted for our wedding.
Yeah.
Right? Like, you just don't know that sticker shock until it's in front of you.
Yeah.
So I think, aligning on what the priorities are. Like, do you just want to throw a really, really cool party? Great. Like, maybe you have a higher budget for food and drink.
Sure.
If you are super adamant that you have like the best photos ever, maybe your photographer is a bigger part of that budget, and you can save money in different areas. I would say that there's no right way to have a celebration for your marriage.
Absolutely.
Whatever works for you guys is the best way to do that. If that is an all-inclusive vacation, great. Have that, all-inclusive wedding.
Right.
If you want to have the best party ever and you are fine with that budget in the long run, like, do that. If you want to run down to the courthouse, cool.
Right.
It doesn't matter how much you spend on that. What matters in the end is your marriage.
I love
and
that.
that it's strong. And that you guys are aligned in your priorities. So if that looks like a courthouse wedding, cool.
Right.
We love it.
That's exactly right. Yeah. It really does. It gets to really the core of what is the most important thing here. You strip all of that other stuff out, and it really comes down to just the core of two people coming together and making that commitment to each other.
Yeah.
So where it's done and how it's done. Now, granted, I will say I'm a foodie. So like for me, when we were going through our wedding, I had to have some prime rib.
Yeah.
And so like I had a budget for that,
Hey,
right?
we did too.
It was so worth it too. But but then you have to think about and evaluate where other expenses go and how you're going to handle those, right? So it really is a matter of communication. I think as we're wrapping up, I think that's some of the big moments. It's communication.
Yep.
It's really compromise, finding that compromise.
And it's open and honest communication.
Great
you
point.
cannot have the same goal if you're not completely clear on exactly how much student loan debt you have,
Right.
or exactly, how much assets you have, or what your priorities are. So making sure that you're completely honest is going to save so much hassle down the road. I will say this. The truth comes out, right?
Oh, yeah.
There's
Absolutely.
not going to be a time after those papers are signed in your marriage where you have absolutely no idea what's going on with your spouse's finances.
Absolutely.
So.
And I think, again, to your point, like if that is where you might be at, it's a question of like, you got to really know the person.
Yeah.
And are you really, really ready for that next step? You know, having those early conversations are important. Now, what's fascinating to me, Olivia, is that I've been reading that, more and more of the younger generation are waiting to get married because their parameters of like what a spouse or what a partner looks like to them and what their expectations are. It's not just, oh, do you have a good job, or, oh, did you graduate college? It's now even like, how much debt do you have? Because I'm not looking to get married to someone that's going to bring a whole bunch of debt into the equation. Or, I've heard where people are like, I got to pay down my debt before I'm ready to be anyone's spouse.
Yeah.
And I'm like, what a different perspective and honestly a maturity that is kind of refreshing, where it's like, I want to make sure I'm thinking about the future spouse, that I'm not bringing a bunch of financial burden into this.
Right.
Now, it's not to say that you shouldn't get married because of that either. But again, everything we come back to is you got to know what's best for you.
Yeah.
And that honest, truthful conversation is going to be the key.
Yeah. I mean, I'll tell you, my husband has a doctorate.
Wow.
That
That's
comes
awesome.
with some student loan debt, right?
Oh my gosh, yes.
But I understand that. And I, on the other hand, I don't have student loan debt. So in my interpretation of that is like, it's okay that you have more because I have none.
That's right. It balances still.
And he tends to feel more guilty about that debt than I feel.
Sure.
Like I'm like, this was aligned with your goal. This was a career that you wanted for your life, and you had to take out some loans to get there. That's okay. Like we can make those payments, right?
Definitely.
But like for people who aren't having those conversations, like if I had gotten married and had no idea that that existed, or was, naive to the fact of how much a doctorate costs, then I may have felt differently. But I think it's important to, like, no matter what financial situation your partner is in, to make sure that you are staying honest with them about your feelings towards it, while trying really hard not to like put any type of guilt on them, because I promise they're probably already feeling it themselves.
Right, exactly. I mean, I think we all can be harder on ourselves than we are on other people in general. And so, wow, that is unbelievable, navigating all of that. Again, I'm glad that you were able to be on this episode today, because you really have that understanding of like going through, student loan debt and having to go through that with your husband and navigating that, and also having kids and having all of these things that come into the equation. And it takes that transparency and that great dialogue in finding the budget. So that's amazing. It
absolutely does.
For those that are listening that are getting married soon, congratulations. We're super excited for you. LMCU is a great place to bring all of your finances here. As you can hear, we absolutely love meeting our members where they're at. So again, we congratulate you if you're getting married. But Olivia, thank you so much for being on today's episode and just bringing some perspective to our members.
Thank you. I had such a fun time.
Good. Awesome. Well, we'll have you on again, and we'll revisit all the fun stuff at another time.
Sounds good.
All right. We'll see you.
Thanks.
Thanks for tuning in. I hope you enjoyed today's conversation as much as I did. If you've got questions or ideas for future podcast episodes, be sure to drop them in the comments below. Also, if you haven't already, consider subscribing and ringing that bell to stay up to date on future episodes on YouTube. You can also like and follow us on Facebook, LinkedIn, Twitter, and Instagram. Thanks so much for joining us, and we'll see you on the next one.